Good morning, everybody. Great to be with you this morning as we conclude our fourth Sunday of Advent. Really exciting. We're approaching the end of the year. Maybe you've noticed that. I don't know if that brings anxiety for you or hope. The sun continues to rotate, and we're going into 2025. So it's interesting when I think about New Year and what it does inside of us. Put your hand up now if you like to try and make some resolutions. Okay, so most of you, like me, are cynical and don't bother. Okay, that's good. And those of you that put your hand up, let's be honest, we know you'll have broken them by February. You know, the gyms make their money off folks that join in January and then never go back. Let's be honest. Fad diets, some of you may try that. Learning Cantonese. Who knows what the things we tell ourselves that we'll manage next year. But what's interesting is this. I want to say this to you. I was doing some research. There is actually, believe it or not, I mean, you can say this about most things, but there is some science behind the idea of why the turn of the year does this to us. And so social scientists call the first of the new year a temporal landmark. A temporal landmark. So in the same way that we rely often on physical landmarks to navigate our way around, for example, if you come to my house, you get to the Shell garage and you turn right. In the same way, we use landmarks in time to navigate our lives. And so the start of the year is a big one of those. We see it approaching, we think about it, we reflect back on the year gone. Like on the soul retreat, we start to think ahead to what the Lord might have for us. But interestingly enough, it isn't just the turn of the year that does this. There's lots of other ways that we often, even unknowingly, frame our lives around it. And so, as ever, you can find some kind of weird study by some nerds at university. And so in 2014, 3 nerds from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania published a paper where they looked into Google searches and linked it to this idea of temporal landmarks. In fact, they analyzed 8.5 years of Google searches, which you can imagine is a lot. And so on January 1st, Google's for diet soared by 80%. 80% more on January 1st. No great surprise there, but those same searches also spiked on Mondays, on the first day of the month, on the first day after a federal holiday. There's something about days that represent firsts that switches on people's minds and their motivations. And so there's an author called Daniel Pink who's written about this, and he said there are 2 types of these landmarks, social and personal. And so the social ones are these ones that we all share. First of the year, first of the month, first of the week, federal holidays. And in contrast, personal ones are ones that are unique to you, your birthday, maybe your wedding anniversary. So for me and my family, for most of our lives, September the 1st was just September the 1st. But now, forever, it will be the day that we arrived in the US, when we moved here from the UK. That date now holds new significance to us in a way it didn't before. And we do this because they interrupt the kind of banality of our day-to-day lives. They give us something to focus on, and they can switch something on in our minds that otherwise we wouldn't think about. And it's the idea of thinking about a spatial landmark is helpful to think about this. Maybe there's something that you notice as you drive home from a vacation, and it just tells you we're nearly home now. I have a photo of this is called the Angel of the North, and this was near where we used to live in the UK. It's 250 feet high, and it's right next to the highway. And so that's my wife and the girls. And so whenever we'd been away, we would drive, you'd see it from afar, you'd pass it, and you'd know we were nearly home. It's been there about 30 years. All the NIMBYs moaned about it when they said they were going to put it in, and now it's loved by one and all. So yeah, that was an example of a landmark that we used to use. But some of you will have those where you live. And it's the same with moments in time as well. They slow us down, they make us pause, and we think about things differently. In fact, the same team found that suffusing significance to a random day could also make you do stuff. So they talk about, today's the first day of spring. Honestly, I think for most of human history, it was just Thursday. But now they say this is the first day of spring. And so, again, it gives you that chance to think about things in a different way. It's like I said, it's why we have wedding anniversaries. It gives you that chance to focus again on your marriage, your birthdays, or all those things. It's why the church calendar can be so helpful. The church calendar gives you a roadmap for all the different ways that God has worked through humanity over the centuries and the millennia, and it gives us that chance to think about it. So why have I started like this? Well, in Advent, we focus on probably the greatest temporal landmark in all of human history, the birth of God as a human baby. This was the landmark that the whole of the Old Testament had been pointing towards, the landmark that all of the prophets had spoken of, yet not quite knowing what it would be. And now for us, it is the landmark that we look back to that is the foundation stone of our faith and our relationship with God. However lost you are, however much pain you're in, whatever life throws at you, whatever befalls you, the landmark of Christ coming to dwell among us can always lead us home. And in this Advent season, we've been looking at the Old Testament book of Habakkuk. I will not say it in the way that you guys say it. We're looking at Habakkuk, and he's a prophet who's been looking around, and as he does that, things are hard. Things feel heavy. He's trying to ask God some hard questions about what he's actually doing, and he's waiting on God to answer. And so, we talk about Christmas as a season of hope and peace and joy, but we're so aware that life can really feel like that. Some years, 2024 may have been a really difficult year for you, and there's something about Christmas that can make the hard things feel even harder. It can infuse an extra potency to them. So we've been using Habakkuk as our guide in this season. And we've been saying this: if you truly want to experience hope and love and joy, then we have to navigate the hard stuff. We have to navigate the hard stuff. And as we read Habakkuk, we see that it is in the hard stuff that he encounters God in an amazing way. So he's been asking questions of God in the form of a lament. God's answering him in a way that he doesn't really expect or even want. Kind of annoying when that happens. And so he goes 2 rounds with God, and he brings his pain and his complaints. And then last week we talked about how there are some specific practical things that we can do as we wait for God to act. And Jay gave us a really helpful analogy of occupied waiting and unoccupied waiting. So if you missed that, I really recommend looking back on the podcast. And so today we're in Habakkuk chapter 3. This is the last one. It's a small book, and at our Northwest Vineyard Church, Scott Engebretson is the pastor there. He's an Old Testament scholar, and he said this to me, that this is perhaps, he thinks, the greatest picture of faith in the whole of the Bible. The whole of the Bible. That's an amazing thing to say. It's also just the kind of thing you would expect an Old Testament nerdy scholar to say as well. So anyway, so we're in chapter 3 in Habakkuk, and he moves from complaint into a prayer. And interestingly, this prayer was sung. So that's your challenge this week. Go home and sing Habakkuk chapter 3. We can write a song out of it in our songwriting group. And I actually think that's a really important point. It's a really important point that his faith in this moment was a sung faith. Have you ever wondered why we sing? Why we worship through song? It's because it does something in the human heart that actually speaking doesn't. There's something about singing together as the people of God that can stir faith and allows us to encounter God in a new way. So we're going to start. Habakkuk chapter 3 verse 2 says this: Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time make them known. In wrath remember mercy. I love that verse. It stirs something in me. Repeat them in our day. So Habakkuk here, he's going back to Yahweh's deeds of old. He's saying, God, I've read about all you've done. I've read about it. Do them in my time. Do them now. Do them again. He's almost taking an inventory of all the wonders that God has done throughout history. 2 weeks ago, we talked about how Habakkuk was clinging to God's character. Now he's clinging to his acts in time and space. He's restating what God has done. And I'm telling you this, our sermon series is called The Thrill of Hope. And if you feel like you're living in a deficit of hope this year, recounting the acts of God in your life is one of the best ways to feel a fresh sense of hope. And even if in your life you struggle to think, open the scriptures again and again. God is at work. Now, we also know that this isn't like a magic wand where if you're in a difficult moment and then you just sing a song and brilliant, everything's good. It probably is in the movies. But in real life, we know that that isn't the case. And so we move on to verse 16 and we see that it isn't that easy. That Habakkuk actually is still wrestling with difficult things, but he's waiting on God to move. And so it says this: I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones and my legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. You can feel the emotion of the moment. See, we're not Gnostics. We really believe that our bodies matter, and we believe that God, when he encounters us, we will feel it as well as understand it in our minds. His heart pounded with uncertainty. His lips quivered, his legs trembled, his bones decayed. So we have this interesting dichotomy between Habakkuk saying, Lord, I know what you've done in the past, come and do it again. And then next he's saying, actually, I'm still in a pretty bad spot. I can't see you moving. He sung this prayer of lament, he sung this prayer of faith, and yet his reality hasn't changed. It didn't all of a sudden become easy. But as we've seen this whole series, faith for Habakkuk and faith for us, it doesn't come after lament, it comes in it. Faith doesn't come after laments, but comes within them. We do not have a faith that tells us that everything works out great. It will ultimately when Jesus returns, but right now, so many of our lives will feel messy. So many parts of your life may feel broken or hurtful. Maybe Christmas just feels difficult for you. Maybe it's a grief from people you've lost, or anxiety around family dynamics. Maybe it's financial challenges. These things are real, but the scriptures tell us, and specifically the book of Habakkuk says, that our faith, you can have faith in the middle of it as we lament, as we recount God's deeds of old. Hope, joy, love, and peace can be your lived reality. I think there's some of you here today where it feels a million miles away. But that doesn't have to be the case. You can be infused with faith in the middle of it. Because the story of Christmas is this: Jesus came into our weariness, into our brokenness, into our sin. God didn't stand afar and say, hey, here are my standards, you guys better meet it. In fact, that's what every other religion in the world tells you to do. Hey, fix yourself, get yourself okay, and then you can come and join me in heaven. Our faith is the upside down of everything else. God came to us in our brokenness. He took on our flesh. It's incredible. So when we know God's character, like Habakkuk dwelt on, when we know what he's done in the past, when we wait for him, he meets us in our lament, and our perspectives can be changed. Our perspectives can be changed. And so as we move through this chapter, we get to this section that Scott holds in such high regard, and I think you'll see why. Verse 17. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God, my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. So much power. I don't know if you're able to say those words this morning. Fill in the blank. Fill in the situation you're in. Though, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. Now, as I read these words and I was thinking about, figs failing and olives failing, I think to some of you it might just sound like a charcuterie board has failed. But it's actually way more serious than that. And again, whenever we read the scriptures, it's so important to put ourselves into the context. And so what we're actually reading here is the description of the disintegration of society that Habakkuk lived in as he knew it. This wasn't the deli section of King Soopers shutting down. This was the foundation of the economy, their food sources, their livestock, their livelihood. Fig trees, grapes, olives, cattle. This was literally everything their culture was built on. And yet, Habakkuk says, if all that fails, I will still praise the Lord. I will still praise him. And I wondered what it would be for us. And I don't mean, oh God, if I can't get next day delivery on Prime and I'll miss Christmas, I will still praise you. I have had to say that in the last week. But what would it be for us? Though I lose my job, God. Though my kids make bad decisions. Though my marriage has failed. though the economy shrinks, though my health declines, my friends betray me, my loved ones die, though life isn't as I would have it, though my addictions corrupt me or the devil attacks me, still I will praise you. Still I rejoice in you because you are my strength. And what's so incredible, even more incredible about this, is that he wrote those words 600 years before Christ came. The prophets wrote and dreamt and thought about what would happen, but they could never have imagined what actually happened, that God would clothe himself in flesh and come to earth. And yet Habakkuk could still write those words. He didn't have that landmark to guide him, and we do. In Matthew 17, Jesus says this, "For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." Humanity for thousands of years longed for the day that God would come. John 1 says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace." We have seen the glory of the only living Son. Habakkuk had not, and he declared that faith in his crisis. How much more can we cling to the risen Jesus in our crises? And so, like I said, we started thinking about landmarks, thinking about things that guide us. And the question before you this Advent season is this: is Jesus the landmark that guides your life? Is Jesus that star in the heavens that led the shepherds to him? He came so that you could have life and life to the full. And that is in the pain you are currently experiencing. It's not at the end of it. It's not when it's all sorted. It's not when you earn a certain amount of money. It's not when you get the relationship you want. Jesus came so that you could experience life to the full in whatever context you are living today. Not the idealized version you have of yourself. And you don't have to carry the burden of your own brokenness. You don't have to identify as something. You don't have to declare who you are to the world. Christ does it for you. You're a son and a daughter of the living God. And I had a real feeling as I prepared that there's some of you, you've heard about Jesus. Maybe you read him in the Bible. Maybe you believe he's real, but you know you have not made him the ultimate landmark in your life, the ultimate guide. Today could be that moment. And I also felt that there's maybe some of you here, and you follow Jesus for a long time, but you find yourself in a moment this Advent season where you just think it's grown stale. Maybe the busyness of life, or the stress, or the pain. Maybe the ups and downs of being part of a church. Maybe friends have betrayed you. Whatever it is, you just know you're sat here, and the mystery and the wonder of the Advent season has kind of just seeped away out of your heart. Well, again, come and meet the Christ child afresh this morning. In Psalm 27, David says this: "One thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." It's such a fascinating phrase to me. Come and dwell on the beauty of the Lord. Imagine if I just stood up this morning and said, "Hey, everyone, we're just going to spend 30 minutes gazing on the beauty of Jesus." We'd probably last about 2 minutes, and then it would just feel awkward, and some of you would sneak out if you're sitting at the back. But there's something about this. Why was King David saying, "One thing I seek, that I would dwell on the beauty of the Lord"? One thing I seek. There's so many things in my life I seek before that. And Habakkuk wrote these beautiful words of faith centuries before Christ came. He could say, "Yet still I will praise you." And we have seen Christ, and we can experience him today, and we can gaze on his beauty and let that transform whatever situation we are in. Have you ever thought about the beauty of Christ? Have you ever thought about the power it has to transform your lives? Well, when you read the scriptures, there is scarcely anything excellent, beautiful, or profitable that is not used to describe Christ. He's called a lion for his great power and conquest. He's called a lamb for his love and compassion. He's our bread and our water. He's the true vine that we are all grafted into. The scriptures say that Christ is beautiful because he is the highest, higher than all the kings and queens of history, all the emperors, all the celebrities. He's higher than the heavens, higher than the angels. He knows everything. There's no limit to his knowledge. His wisdom is perfect. His power is infinite. None can resist him. And he's inexhaustibly brilliant. This is Christ who came to earth for us. My uncle, who now is with Christ in glory, wrote these words: I want to lose my heart to Christ day after day after day. I figure I was created to be engrossed by him. I think he wants me to be enamored and thrilled by him, who he is no less than what he does. What would it be like to be utterly enthralled by the immensities of his character or enraptured by his ways? I want to be excited by Christ, held in worshipful awe. I want to be astounded and absorbed by the depths of his wisdom and love. I want to be agog at the work in my life that he does. I want to be staggered at all the ways he leads me, and still I want more of him, and still there is more of him for me to know. This morning, our invitation is to come and gaze at Christ, who was born in a manger, so that you and me may have peace with the Father. And that is your invitation this morning. So no matter what circumstances you find yourself in, you can experience the peace of Christ this Advent. I'm coming into land very soon, but I actually wanted to end with this story from Greek mythology. Don't worry, you are in a Christian church, but it's helpful to us as we think about this. And this is of the contrasting tales of Ulysses and Jason of the Argonauts. And so they both had to make journeys in boats, and they had to sail past these rocks. And on these rocks were these awful yet beautiful demons called sirens. And they would sing the most beautiful songs. And as sailors would hear them, they would be bewitched, and they would be drawn in, and then their boats would be dashed on the rocks, and they would die. It's like the song I hear when I walk into a second-hand bookstore. I just have to buy books. I feel bewitched, much to my wife's dismay. And so, anyway, Ulysses goes first, and he tells his men to plug their ears with wax so they would not hear the song. But his ego was so great, he wanted to hear it, and so his men tie him to the mast. They lash him to the mast so he could hear it, and he almost went mad with desire, hearing the song, hearing the full horror of the song. Yet Jason's turn comes round, and so he came up with a different idea. He didn't want to have any ears plugged with wax. That sounds kind of gross. He didn't want to be tied to the mast. Instead, he turned to Orpheus, a beautiful singer and lyre player, and he said to him, Orpheus, play us a more beautiful song. Play us a song that will be so beautiful we won't actually be drawn in to that other song that we hear. Because Jason was so convinced that the sirens would not enchant them if they were more captivated, more in wonder by a far more beautiful thing. And he was right. They sailed through the rocks, ignoring those voices. Their hearts were captivated by beauty. I think you might guess where I'm going with this. So many of us go through life plugging our ears and hoping to just get through the year without making too many mistakes. It's what Dallas Willard used to call the gospel of sin management. We just try and manage our crap and just hope that we get to heaven. And there is so much more life on offer for you. There was a far more beautiful thing for you to gaze upon, far more beautiful than alcohol or sex or power or money or prestige, popularity. It's the face of Jesus. So I would love the band to come up, and we're going to take a minute to respond.